He was really excited.
You're on.
Now we'll call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Miss Bigger, roll call, please.
Harrington.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Musgrave.
Here.
Brandon.
Here.
Kinnaman. Kyer.
Here.
Delaney.
Here.
Do we need a motion to excuse Mr. Kinnaman?
Yeah, I'll entertain that motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Musgrave, support by Perkins to excuse Mr. Kinnaman. Miss Bigger, roll call vote, please.
Perkins.
Yes.
Musgrave.
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Kyer.
Yes.
Delaney.
Yes. Motion carries. Mr. Kinnaman is excused. Mr. Walker, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Council. So this is our first budget workshop of the year. As you know, we have another one scheduled for next week. The purpose of today's workshop is to cover the majority of your general fund departments, so any activity that's funded from the general fund. Next week will be dedicated mostly to water, sewer, and those departments that are supervised by Utilities Director Clausen. So we affectionately call next week the Brian Week. So you will have,
Brian Show.
yeah, you will have a steady show of steady diet of Brian next week. He'll cover all his budgets, and it's really amazing when you look at next week's packet to see the number of budgets that he does or is responsible for. So that's it. Joining us today is Pam Hill, and you're all familiar with Pam, so she is our lead. Yes. Yes, yes.
Morning, Pam.
Right?
We're not worthy.
So Pam is our lead from Plant Moran, and Plant Moran has been a long-time partner with the village, guiding us as we go through these changing times with the budgets and different legislative acts that come through that control the way that municipalities budget and record expenditures and comply with state and federal regulations. So we're very thankful for that. Pam also joins us today, though, to give just a basic Budget 101. And this is not something that we do every single year, but every couple of years we like to do it because, as you know, there are updates every year, and this just helps us catch up and is good for staff as well as the council. And so without further ado, Pam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here this morning. I appreciate it. Excited to be here. You know, anytime I get to talk about anything accounting and budget, I get excited. So this is a good Saturday morning for me. I did pass out a presentation, which that's my plan is just to kind of walk through these items at a high level. As Jerry pointed out, this is really kind of a refresher, and for those of you that are new to council, just kind of a budget for beginners. Just to talk a little bit about why do you do a budget? Why is there a budget? What are the rules that govern the budget? And it'll be a good kind of starter for you as you head into the process, give you a good overview of kind of why you're doing what you're doing. So with that, I will turn to slide 1. And really this is kind of an overview of what I'll be talking about today. Talking about the legal requirements related to the Budget Act, that is the reason why you're doing the budget, and then also talk a little bit about the budget versus the General Appropriations Act. I'm sure you'll be hearing that phrase a little bit throughout the process, and then what is required to be in a budget versus what do you actually put in a budget. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So slide 2, there's many different types of budgets that you're allowed to use. What the village uses is what's kind of this middle bullet in here, a cost center budget, so departmental budget. And so as Jerry pointed out today, you'll be hearing budgets and looking through the budgets for several departments of the village today. Oftentimes you will see it by line item. So you'll get to see every single line item in the general ledger that Debbie deals with every day. But you're actually not passing the budget on a line item basis. You're passing it on a departmental basis. And so, you know, the distinguishment there is there's some leeway in between those line items within the department to move things around if need be. But as long as they're staying within their budget for that department, then they're not over budget. So, just kind of FYI, there's also, the reason why you don't pass on a line item is because it is very, labor intensive from an accounting standpoint and really just from a management standpoint. So, oftentimes you're given that detail and they try to stay in that, in that, line item, but it's not required. Oftentimes as well, there can be a fund budget, which means you just pass the total expenditures for that whole fund. That we don't see that as often, but sometimes when you have a very small fund, you might see that type of budget being used. All right, so next on slide 3 are the legal requirements. So Public Act 2 of 1968 is actually the law that was enacted that requires you to adopt a budget. So oftentimes we associate budget with the General Appropriations Act, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference. But the budget documents are actually what's prepared by your team and given to you, and you use those budget documents to ultimately come up with the decision as to what the village is going to spend this year and what types of revenues you expect to come in. And the actual resolution that you will pass eventually at one of your council meetings is the General Appropriations Act. And then that gives your team the authority to spend the dollars as they were in the budget. So a little bit of a distinction there in terms of that. And we'll talk a little bit on slide 4 about what is required to be in the General Appropriations Act. So the General Appropriations Act requires you to budget for your general fund, which, as Jerry mentioned, will be a lot of what you're focusing on today, and then any special revenue funds. So some of the special revenue funds that the village has is obviously major and local streets, which would be probably one of your bigger ones. And then I'm just flipping here to make sure that I cover them all. But major and local streets would be the bigger ones. And I know you have a couple other ones. Your solid waste fund, and then your transportation fund. So those 4 or 5 special revenue funds, along with your general fund, are what's absolutely required to have a budget adopted, so if you were to follow PA2. Now, best practice is that you adopt a budget for every single fund in the village, which is what you do. But it's not required. Again, it is a best practice and something we recommend, but just if you're following PA2, it wouldn't be required. So in order to commit any resources to purchasing goods or services, you do need to have them budgeted. And that's why you'll see budget amendments brought to you either at the end of the year, sometimes throughout the year, depending on how big the projects are, if they were budgeted for or not to begin with. So it is perfectly acceptable to amend your budget, right? No one has a crystal ball. You're not going to sit here right now and know what's going to happen 8 months from now. So that's why it is allowed within the statute to amend the budget, and all that requires is your team to bring a budget amendment to the council and for you to approve that amendment. And also, obviously, you need to have the dollars available to approve that amendment as well. Sure, Deb.
And those special funds can only be used for those restricted purposes, correct?
Yep, and we will get into that a little bit. That's a great point. And so when you're looking at the budget document, general fund, for the most part, general fund revenues are unrestricted, for the most part. So it's your property tax dollars, and it's your state shared revenue, which there is not any specific requirement on how those funds need to be spent. Obviously they need to fund the operations of the general fund, but other than that, there is flexibility in the spending of those dollars. Now, if you were to talk about maybe your major and local streets, those dollars are specifically from Act 51 money, so like your sales and use tax, gas tax, you go to the pump, you're paying a tax there. Those are specifically, can only be used for either major streets or local streets, depending on which fund and which bucket of money that's in. So it is important when you're looking at these funds, and next week when you look at Brian's water and sewer fund, those monies can't just be used for anything. So if you're saying, we want to do something that's specific to general fund, you can't say, well, water and sewer has money, we're going to take it and use it for police. That's just not the way it works. There's restrictions on those dollars. So it's important to keep in mind as you're looking through the budget that, you kind of almost have to look at it as like, stay in your lane, right? So general fund has these revenues, let's use it for these purposes. Major funds has these revenues, let's use it for these purposes, water and sewer, etc. So there are rare instances when you can move money out of general fund to help with, other projects, but most of the time you can't move money out of those other funds back to general. Okay, so general is kind of the most available funds, and everybody else is in their own fund because those monies are restricted. So, any questions on that? Great point, Deb, a great question. So even though the General Appropriations Act that you will pass does give management the ability to make decisions based on the budget, ultimately it's not ultimate approval, so you do still have purchasing policies and other policies in place that will require things over a certain dollar amount to come to council to be approved. So it allows them to plan and to move forward with plans that are set forth in the budget process, but ultimately there's still items that will need to be brought back to council for approval. Jim, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. Next page 5. So there are obviously various steps that you'll need to take throughout the process. One of them is the meeting you're holding today, right? So it's very, very common to have study sessions on how you plan to spend these dollars and have them that are available to the public if they would like to join or hear and input their thoughts into the budget process, right? So you must hold a local or a public hearing on the budget once you get to the point where you're ready to pass the budget, and then you have to publish a notice and all of that, which Debbie always takes care of. And within your budget, part of what is required is that you set your property tax millage rate within that budget. And then that'll get posted as well, and it'll be approved as part of the General Appropriations Act, what you plan to set your millage rate at. And so that's an important concept because a lot of times the budget process is focused on expenditures. What are you going to expend? But you also need to make sure you're focusing on revenues, right? Because that's how you pay for those expenses. So if you don't have enough revenues, that'll drive the discussion around what you can spend, right? So the revenues is an important piece of the budget process. All right, so slide 6 is just kind of a brief recap on the General Appropriations Act that council will be passing here in the next month or two. Again, it's required for all your funds, for general fund and special revenue fund. However, you will pass one for all of your funds. It must include information on your property tax levy, and then your estimated revenues and authorized expenditures or total expenditures. And then Debbie has been working very hard on, Jerry mentioned there's always updates, right? So between federal updates, accounting standard updates, and state laws, there's constant updates and changes. One of the more recent ones that probably, I think, came up 5 years ago but was delayed quite significantly with COVID was updates to the chart of accounts. So that would be all the general ledger account numbers that Debbie uses to prepare this budget and to do the accounting every day. There was changes to the uniform chart of accounts through the state. So that, is being done and making sure you're in conformance with all those general ledger accounts. So one thing to point out with the budget, because I get this question a lot, and I even see it in the news and stuff, and I have to kind of chuckle, but so most individuals, when you say you need to have a balanced budget, think that a balanced budget means revenues have to equal expenses, right? So that's actually not, when you look at PA2 and you look at the General Appropriations Act and budgeting rules, that's actually not what it means, okay? So there could be a year, and you've had some of those years, where you may pass a budget that your expenditures are exceeding your revenues, okay? And that's okay to do as long as you have enough fund balance, and fund balance would kind of be, like what you've saved over the years, right? So in years where your revenue has come in greater than your expenses, it's almost like a savings account, right? You've been able to accumulate funds over a long period of time. So in a year where you may have something come up where you need to use fund balance for, that's what it's there for, right? And we'll talk in a few slides about what's the right level of fund balance and making sure you don't use all of it and that kind of thing. But that is kind of a common misnomer, I think, that a balanced budget means, your revenues have to equal your expenses. That's not always the case. So just kind of keep that in mind as you go through the budget process. And also keep in mind, sometimes you can have a budget where your revenues are greater than your expenses, because from an operational standpoint, that's just where you land this year, and you're saving up for something, and that's, or a lot of things, and that's okay too. So just keep that in mind as you go through the budget process. So on pages, slides 7 through 9, this is a quick budget summary. So I kind of look at this as a checklist. So that's why I've got the columns on the right that say yes or no. So in order to be in compliance with PA2, you want to have answered all of these things yes by the time you get done passing your budget, right? And that means you'll be in compliance with the Budget Act. So have you adopted a budget for your general fund and special revenue funds? Yes, we talked about that. Did you hold your public hearing? Yes. Did you include all of the necessary information? And you'll see in the packet that Debbie and Jerry gave you, you'll have all of this information in there for the funds that are the departments that you will be talking about today. So you'll have actual for your prior year from both revenues and expenses. You'll have an estimate of where you are in the current year, right? You're almost done with fiscal year 23. You only got 2 more months left. And then you'll have your proposed budget for fiscal year 24. So that will be required to be in your final budget document. On the next page, if you have any contingencies, sometimes we see at clients where, it's like, instead of having to go back to council every time, they might say, well, you know what, there's going to be unknowns. So maybe there's a small amount of contingencies that's approved within the budget process. Some communities use that, some don't. I think it's acceptable either way. But just a note, if you were going to have them, you would have that included in your budget. And then, as I talked about, what is your amount of fund balance at the beginning of the process? So Debbie will estimate where does she think fund balance is going to be at the end of June 30, 2023. And then you can see, based on the budget that you pass, where does that leave your savings account at the end of 2024 based on the budget you pass. And so that's, I think, one of the key measures that you want to always look at is your fund balance, right? To make sure that you're not passing a budget that's going to put you in a position where maybe, it's not as strong as it could be. So just making sure that, fund balance is a central part of your overall budget. And you won't really get into that when you're looking just purely at departments, but, kind of at the end, where does that leave you? And then is the budget balanced? We just talked about that. So making sure that at the end of the day, your fund balance isn't going negative. You wouldn't be allowed to pass a budget that did that. And then, ensuring that you're amending the budget when appropriate throughout the year, or at least once at the end of the year. And then on slide 9, so kind of the same rule here. Has the budget been properly amended? If you have any new debt that you're going to be entering into, making sure that was appropriately done or entered into by law. There's obviously budget hearings and approval by council if you're going to enter into new debt. And then at the end of the day, and we always look at this during the audit process, and I know Debbie looks at it at the end of the year, and that's when she'll bring additional budget amendments to you. You want to make sure that your expenditures that were incurred during the year are less than what you budgeted for. So technically, if you are over budget, it's a violation of PA2, because that means you spent money that was not budgeted for or approved by council. And so during the budget process, the state actually has gotten pretty strict over the years. When we would do the audit, if you were over by 1% or something, we really would typically not report that to the state. And then they kind of set something out to everyone and said, if you're $1 over, like, the CPAs have to report that. So Debbie gets to get a little letter sometimes, from the state saying, hey, you were over budget. Why is that? And it's like, well, it was $100 or something. But we get it, right? PA2 does not say there's a dollar threshold. It says you cannot spend anything that wasn't appropriated. So just FYI is, you might look at that through your financial statements at the end of the year when Debbie gives you that budget report. That's why she's giving you those last minute amendments, because she's trying to get as close as possible so she doesn't get, a nasty gram for the state saying, hey, let me know why you're $100 over budget. So again, you want to go through all of these, and then kind of at the end, you want to be able to answer yes to all of these questions, and then you'll know that you're in compliance with the budget requirements. Okay, I know that was a lot. Does anybody have any questions on what I covered specifically related to budget requirements? Okay. If not, I'm just going to spend 2 or 3 slides. I lied, it could be 4. No, 3. On fund balance, because I do think fund balance is a very important part of the budget process. I mean, ultimately, that's the point of what you're doing, right? Is to make sure that you're getting to a comfortable position within your fund balance. So, and I think we talked about this, at the audit presentation back in December, but this is a good refresher. So, we get asked this question all the time. What's the right amount of fund balance? And unfortunately, the answer is there really is not a magic number, right? So we can't say, you should have X amount or you should have Y amount. One of the measures of fund balance that is often used in municipals is fund balance compared to the expenditures. So, if your expenditures are $2 million, what percentage of in your fund balance is $500,000, right? Then it's 25%, right? If I did the math right, I think I did. I don't have my calculator, so using that percentage, you'll hear people oftentimes use a percentage. Well, you're 25%, or you're 30%, or 50%. That's what they're doing to calculate that. They're taking your fund balance and dividing it by your budgeted expenses, okay? So you'll see some percentages throughout this. That's the percentage that we're talking about. So there are probably different minimums for different funds. And then there's also a lot of different things to consider that we'll talk about on the next few slides. So typically as you grow larger, that percentage can be smaller, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if your budget is $50 million, 10% is $5 million, right? So that number is bigger. So if you had an emergency and you needed to repair your roof and you had $5 million, no, you're probably okay, right? But if you have a budget of $2 million, right, 10% is only $200,000. Now, you could repair the roof, maybe, but you might not have a lot left. And so that's why the smaller your budget, the larger kind of the recommended minimum amount is, right? And so I have on here some kind of small, like some ranges. These would be minimum ranges that you'd want to be looking at. So most governments, the smaller ones, like I said, are kind of in that 20 to 25% for a minimum. Back in probably 08, 09, when property tax revenues dropped significantly, those communities that were at the minimum or lower, it was a struggle, right? Because all of a sudden your main revenue source, or one of them, got cut pretty significantly. So me being an accountant, I always like to be conservative, so I always like to try to say, remember those kind of things. If you're at the bare minimum, there's always risk, right? And a lot more risk. And so I know with your jobs being the health and well-being of the community, you want to make sure that you're balancing what needs to be done and making sure that you have the appropriate minimum level to make sure you can pay your employees and all of those kind of things. So that's kind of some minimum ranges. So special considerations, as I said, there's really not a right dollar amount because every situation is different. And so on page 12 are some of the special considerations to think about as you're going through the budget process. So you might have some planned capital needs, and so those would obviously be different from an operation than your operational needs. So oftentimes we'll see in a budget that your revenues exceed your expenditures from an operational standpoint. When you're dipping into fund balance to fund operations, that gets to be pretty risky area, right? Because it just would be like where you have to, personally, if you're going into your savings every month to just live, it's kind of scary, right? So you want to look at this you almost want to look at it in two pieces, right? You have your operational piece and then you have your capital. Because your capital isn't something you're going to be doing the same thing over and over every year. You're not replacing a roof every year. You're not buying a fire truck every year. You're not buying a new police car every year. Well, maybe. But you're not buying 5 new ones every year, right? So, sorry, Chief. I'm not picking on you, I swear.
I'm coming to Brian.
So, those kind of things you do need to keep in mind as you're going through the budget process. So, maybe you're saying, we know we need a new fire truck in 3 years, so we're going to start setting aside X amount for the next 3 years. Or maybe Chief says, actually, we're going to bond for that, it's easier, or we're going to, take a loan out for that, it makes more sense from a cash flow perspective. Whatever it is, those are the types of considerations that if you told me, well, we're saving, $100,000 every year for the next 3 years to buy a fire truck, that percentage of expenditures might look a lot higher than 30%, right? But you have a plan for it. So that's why I always say it's the most important piece is not necessarily what your percentage is, unless it gets too low, but as long as you have a plan. So 1 year you might be at 80%. That'd be wonderful, right? But, and I know you guys are not in that situation, but let's say you are. It could be because you are saving up for something. So as long as you have a plan, in my mind, there's never too much fund balance. It's the lower end that, I start to get concerned, and I know you've had discussions with management about that. So planned capital is probably the biggest one. One that I would say has probably gained a little more attention lately is we're seeing a lot of people retire and exit the workforce is, compensated absences. So you accumulate over time sick vacation, and things like that can get paid out when you retire, those could be some significant dollars depending on your policy. And so, if you have 3 people retire in 1 year, you might have one big $50,000 that you have to pay out that you wouldn't normally have in any given year. So thinking through those things, any long-term unfunded liabilities like pension, those types of items. And then these are just some random, if you have anything where maybe there's a bigger lawsuit, thankfully you guys are in that situation, but environmental issues or just unusual items that may come up that are one-time type purchases. Those are not purchases, but items. Those are the types of things you want to just, if you have those, your team is already thinking about those in terms of where they play in the budget. And then lastly, on slide 13, just keeping in mind, and we talk a little bit about this in the year-end presentation, but you do have some situations where you're going to have assets that are not cash, right? So you might have inventory for Brian's a great example. He's going to have inventory that he needs that is sitting there. It's not cash, right? So you can't just trade it in and use it to pay bills, but it's going to be on your balance sheet. So making sure you're thinking through those types of things that not all assets are cash. And then any considerations related to revenue reductions. We haven't heard of anything in terms of state shared revenue. You already got your census adjustments, so that you already know where that's going to be. And so everything we're seeing is so far that sales tax collections and things are still pretty stable. They really haven't dipped, which I think was a big concern when COVID hit. And then the market to date, from a property tax standpoint, at least in the area, has been pretty stable. I think that it's actually still rising, and so nothing I think right now, but always planning for the what if, right? Because I don't think anyone back in 08 thought that was going to happen, or those of us have been around a long time. I still remember 01 when they cut your state shared revenue, and really have never given it back to you, right? So there's always opportunities for others to be kind of taking. So just being cautious in those kind of things as well. And I know your team is always very conservative on the revenue side because they don't want to be in that position where they're going, oh crap, we came in significantly under. So it is always good to be somewhat realistic but conservative, when you're looking at your revenues. And then if there's anything that is in fund balance already that has been earmarked or needs to be spent on something specific, just kind of keeping those things in mind. You don't really have much of that. I mean, you have some ARPA dollars, but those technically haven't been recognized as revenue yet. So I don't think there's really much there for you, but in the future if there was something. And then as I already kind of pointed out, just making sure that you have enough from a working capital or cash perspective at a minimum to make sure you can pay all the bills as they come due. And Debbie's got a great handle on, okay, every 2 weeks or every month, this is how much cash goes out the door. So she's already taking that into consideration when looking at the budget and looking at minimums and what cash she needs and where it needs to be. So that was all I had planned to cover. Any questions on fund balance or anything I didn't cover that maybe I could help answer?
Well, there was a term I'm unfamiliar with.
Sure.
And it was straits. I think you said major and local, if I remember. And I really
yeah.
don't know what that term means.
Yeah, so Act 51, which is the public act that basically takes all the money from your gas tax, sales and use tax, and distributes it out. Okay, they have certain formulas that they use, that they provide the formulas, the updated formulas to the local units every year, so you can kind of estimate what your next year's Act 51 revenue is going to be. You receive a certain dollar amount every month for major streets. So that would be, not like your subdivisions. And then local streets, which would be more like subdivision and local roads. Those dollars can only be spent on those roads. And you'll see in your financial statements and in your budget that you will have a separate budget for major street projects and for local street projects. There are, not to get too in the weeds, but there are certain rules also in Act 51 that allows you to transfer money from major over to local, because oftentimes, especially in smaller communities, you have a lot more local road projects than you do, your major roads. And so there are certain rules that allow that, and so you may see transfers in the budget document where you're taking money from major and moving it over to local. That's perfectly allowed within Act 51. So it's dollars specifically received from the state that can only be used on roads.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for letting me come today, and good luck with your
Thank you, Pam.
budget process. We'll see you again in probably 5 or 6 months.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you very much.
Are we going to applaud her out?
Oh, thank you.
All right. Police Department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President and Council. So as always, Pam did an excellent job. And so if you have any questions that you think of after she's gone, just let Debbie or I know. And if we don't have the answer, we know where to get it, and we'll be happy to do that for you. So as we start through our general fund budget, so one thing we like to do is we like to just give you just a real brief, concise overview of what we did with departments the past year with the budget monies that council appropriated, and then tell you what we plan to do in the upcoming year. And so one little caveat with the police department budget, and really this is specific just to this, is one of Chief Nurse's favorite sayings is, if you can't trust a cop, who can you trust? Just keep that in mind when he's talking. just in this one area of budget, because he's going to tell you, and it's true, that his budget this upcoming year is less than his budget that was approved last year. And that is true. And that's something that we all try to do as departments, but it's difficult when you have union raises that are built in and just general cost of living and inflation increases. But keep in mind, on your May 9th council agenda, we will have a proposal, I'm confident, in front of you, a new partnership program with the Holly area schools. And so they were able to secure a grant for additional funding for security purposes, including an additional school resource officer. And so with that, our request is going to be, as long as we get the contract negotiated with the school, which we're 99% there, so I'm sure we will, is for the addition of another full-time officer. About 83 or 85% of that officer's time will be dedicated strictly to the schools. So it is not going to be used at all in the village unless we have such an emergency response where we need to call those officers out of the schools. But the other 15 or 17% is going to go right back into road patrol time, really during our peak months in the summer when the schools are out, when we need the manpower the most and we end up spending money on overtime or extra part-time officers or the like. And so that's coming our way. So we're pretty excited about that, and it's going to be a great addition to the police department. So with that, no offense, take it away.
Well, there's also, I was told early on in my career, there's two things that don't pay: police chiefs and crime.
We practice these lines for our post-employment era.
Pam's not here. I was going to ask for one more additional budget term. So as it relates, we got a week for Brian Week. So I thought tonight, today, as it looks to the police department, any budget allocation funds for the police department going forward ought to be called Colonel Fund. Raise your hand if you get it. Never mind. Colonel Fund allocations, that's what we're talking about today.
I get it.
I'll be
I just
brief.
don't think it's funny.
First off, thank you, council. Good morning. And I do want to compliment and say that, you know, these budgets, although there's a lot of experience in the room, we have a very talented department head staff. And that's not every municipality has that, and we do. So budget preparation is something they've done for a long time. But none of us would do that without the acumen and the knowledge and the history of the management team that we have. Jerry and Debbie actually have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in this, and we couldn't do it without their help. So they have done a phenomenal job in cutting money out of us, but for the right reasons. Just briefly, it's all here in front of you. As to Brian's point, no, we are not buying any police cars this year. So there are no police cars in this budget. It is slightly down. We continually look at our operational aspect of providing not only exceptional police service, but maintaining those areas or improving those areas as needed that are liabilities. And we happen to be the area of liability for the village. We are a high-risk area in law enforcement. So fail to train, fail to supervise, and fail to prepare are the biggest liability areas in law enforcement. So we counter that. We have countered that, and thank you. This village has countered that. We've increased our supervision staff. We've increased how they supervise, and we've increased training. And our training is relevant and current as to everything going on today, and we make sure that our staff understands that. And I think the really cool thing about our staff as it relates to our relationship in our community is we had a social media thing the other day, and it made me think pretty much everybody in Holly knows our staff by name. They do. And the cool thing is most of our staff know pretty much everybody in Holly by name. So that is a tremendous benefit. As it relates to the budget, if I'm here for any questions, I mean, this one really is kind of the same as last year, but a little bit less. And yet meet all of those needs to maintain operational readiness and not buy extra police cars.
Chief, what's Act 302 expenditures?
Act 302 is dollars that the state, and just like in 01, when we lost, Pam had mentioned, the state keeps trimming that down. There was a time, those are training dollars. So every FTE or full-time equivalent, and it's not just for the full-time staff. We have several part-time officers that are experienced, sometimes retired officers or active on other agencies. Every 2,080 hours combined of their time in service is training funds that we get from the state. So $302. And then we use this as almost a pass-through fund, and this is a good savings and deal for us. We now take $302 in our training consortium, which we just went from the MLEORTC to the Oakland County Training Consortium because they have more classes, more training, but they accept those dollars, so there's no additional cost. So whatever the state gives us, the consortium accepts, and for smaller departments like ours, that's a really good deal. Some of the classes are loan. If you weren't in their training consortium, might be $800, and you send 10 officers to that. Well, we're not even paying. You're looking at the number. That's what we pay for all of the officers on the department for a year's worth of training.
When we go through general fund revenue at the next budget study, you'll see a revenue line for the same amount in the same category.
Cool. Thank you.
So,
In the Colonel Fund.
Captain Fund if you're on the water.
But if you have any questions on any other funds, I'm happy to.
I just had one question.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a line for uniforms and then uniform allowances. Like, what What are those differences?
The uniform allowance is contractual with full-time, so they get a certain amount, and the other uniform account is part-time.
Okay.
And so for part-time officers, and that's the one I'm in now, so any uniform needs for part-time, we get out of that. So when we hire a new officer, we have to hurry up and get them uniforms. And go.
I have a couple questions. Training, you're recommending to double. Well, practically double. Now, I know that this year you all got some free active shooter training. So is that to perhaps make up for that in the future? Because you can't always expect it to be free? Or is it something else?
Actually, we're going to get a lot more free training this year.
Awesome.
This is part of my fail to supervise, fail to train. In developing good supervision, this is including training conferences that are going to not only include myself, but our supervisory staff. They're going to be going to more additional training than in the past. Quite frankly, we haven't done it all. So I want to get our supervisory staff into that training as well, and that benefits this village. And, you know, I always like to say we have to train down and train up, because, you know, I could end up under a bus, or Amanda could say, hey, let's go someplace and retire. That's not going to happen for a while, because I'm married to Amanda.
Because you like shopping.
Was that my outside?
And it's being broadcast.
That's okay. She won't watch it. But I say this to her too. You know, she spends money that isn't there. Was that appropriations thing? Remember that? It was page 7. I'm taking that home. I'm going to show
You
that
are
to her.
digging yourself a hole.
I know.
Just
Stop
take the
talking.
But anyway,
take the shovel away. My goodness.
take the shovel.
Stop talking.
Anyway, that is why. So we're gonna do additional training for our supervisory staff as well.
Fantastic. And then my other question is office equipment and fixtures on the second page, and it's being cut from 12 to 7, it looks like. And I remember in the past when you and I talked, you talked about, and I'm not sure if this would be the right line item, but about needing a new phone system, update, software, computers, and all of those things. And I don't know if that would count as office equipment. I don't know if you already got those things. I'm just wondering why the suggested cut
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. I love it when cuts are questioned. Actually, we did, and Mr. Walker actually spearheaded a telephone system village-wide that's saved us a ton of money, a lot of money. So that's in place. We did, and the reason it was cut, each year we have different needs, and I try to project out. Some of this stuff will have a 3 to a 5, maybe a 12-year shelf life. Last year, some big equipment, some servers and some other things, the shelf life was up, and we had to purchase those, and they were expensive. And so we adjust this. This year I don't anticipate, and that's the hard part, but I really don't anticipate any of those items being needed to be replaced.
Well, thanks.
The
I
big
appreciate
items.
that. I think everything else makes sense on face value, so thank you.
I have a question. How many reserve officers do we have currently in place?
We are up to about 10.
10?
And those are the officers that you see. So we had, I think, 2 or 3 when I came on board in 19. I've got a lot of experience working with reserve officers, and they are a tremendous benefit to a community, and especially in Holly, where we have a lot of events, parades, festivals, different things going on. These are well-trained people. Some of them are actually previous law enforcement certified, and they've retired, but they'd like to stay in the game. Very talented people. They have training, very little resources, and there's no pay. There's no cost. They want to give back to their community. So when you see 4 officers at an event, I'll pretty much guarantee you that half or more of those officers are reserve officers. And they work with our certified officers, but now there's zero cost, and anybody coming into town, all they see, they look over, they see 4 uniforms, 4 police officers. And it is an added security at absolute, almost zero cost. We put money in a budget because their training isn't covered under Act 302, and we do send them to some training. And we do provide some things for them. They're going to qualify at the range, like the rest of the officers, so I incorporate some of that into the cost. Badges, other things that they'll need to carry, but it's very minimal. There's actual no cost for them.
Do you feel 1,000 is enough?
I do. We're not gonna, I've over the last 4 years got it to, or 3 years got it to kind of 10, and we may pick up a few more, but we're doing pretty good with the amount we have, and they're talented people, and they've been helping. So, but I think 1,000, I think it's enough.
I should say, while you're talking about reserves too, just keep in mind that those with prior law enforcement experience, of course, they don't require any training, but there are some who come to us with zero training. And I think both the chief and I, we both started our law enforcement careers in that way, with zero training, because we knew we wanted a career in the future in law enforcement. And so in those cases, we have to send those individuals off to a police academy for training. It's in excess of 400 hours of training. So by the time they come out, I mean, they have a baseline of 400 hours of training at a minimum, and then whatever else the department provides them. As well in structure, just to go along with Ms. Brandon's question, we currently have, Chief, 3 sergeants. That's what compiles our command staff. And so previously, we had 1 full-time sergeant, 1 part-time sergeant, and while the part-time sergeant was very good and very experienced, it was part-time. And so just our hours of coverage were not there. And so as the chief said, when you're talking about what things create liability for a department, its failure to supervise is a huge one. And so we're very happy now that we have 3 sergeants, the chief, and then he's continuing to train them up and give them additional training that we didn't have even before. So, I mean, we're on good ground there. So that's all. I just wanted to give you basic structure.
So that's kind of why I was asking. I'm familiar with the reserve process, and I just wanted to make sure there was adequate money in there, because I know certain things do pop up from time to time, so.
Yeah.
So he's at the point now, because he has 10, he can be, we can be really selective in who we hire for reserves. We're not desperate for bodies. The more the better, of course, but I mean, I don't see a whole bunch of new recruits that will be sending off for that 400-hour training.
And I will add, and I want everybody to know that, especially even the public that hear this, is most certainly council, but we do not bring in as a reserve officer, I should phrase it this way, everyone we bring in as a reserve officer would meet all of the state level criteria for hiring as a certified police officer. So our standards are as high as if they're going to be a full-time police officer, and we also require that training. So there are a lot of departments that don't do either of those. We do both. So we require that academy training, and we demand that they be meet all of the same criteria as any police officer on the department for the safety and, of course, the liability for the community.
So we've got more coverage with these reserve and part-time officers, but it's also lending towards that legacy cost alleviation.
Well, yes, it's not creating new. If you look at this, 25% of my budget is retirement costs.
Yeah.
I mean, 25%, that's big. The good news is, and again, through some leadership, it's good and bad news, I guess. Good news if you're the village, bad news if you're a police officer, but we don't have those legacy costs accumulating like they used to. So our retirement package is a little different. It still benefits that officer when they retire, but it doesn't add the legacy costs like it used to. So every year that goes by, we're not adding to that.
It's gone to 401k as opposed to pension?
Correct.
Yeah, defined contribution as opposed to defined benefit.
Resourceful, thank you.
Thank you.
So all reserves have to be MCOLS qualified?
Meet MCOL's qualification.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chief?
I like that the number went down.
Oh, I guess one final question, going off that. I guess one of the biggest things on here is retirement, and you're recommending 420 for next year. So over the years, is that projected to go down?
This is a terrible thing to say, but when people expire that are on the department, things they do go down and go away. Presently, we have more people retired than we have working in the police department. So that was an inevitability, right? And that led to some of the decisions that management made for the fiscal acumen for the village to trim that. And it will go down, and it does get paid, and the village, I'm not sure what percentage we're at on being fully funded, but that percentage is paid into, and it will go down. Yeah.
So, in theory, it will go down, because of the factors that the chief said. In reality, however, MERS keeps increasing the requirement that the village or all municipalities is required to pay, because they want us to pay that off, and the state wants everybody to pay that off. And so it'll be going down in one respect, it'll be staying the same or increasing in another respect. Now, one thing that, again, you'll see in a future council agenda is there was some money appropriated by the state of Michigan for all municipalities that have underfunded pensions, and we would qualify for that, as probably 80% of the state qualifies for that. And we will have the opportunity to be considered to have our pension brought up to a 60% level. And so that will help with that area of what our actual requirement is. I mean, village-wide, we're almost at $1 million per year that we pay into retirement, but it's just for that factor, because the police department's not the only one that has more retirees than actives. It's village-wide, because we're an older municipality, and it's just the reality. But we look for this new money appropriated at the state to be a great aid to not only us, but all the underfunded communities across Michigan. So, and we should receive that money in August, but there's no guarantee, and so that's why you will see none of that mentioned in the budget. And that's why I mention it now, because while they say the check's in the mail, Debbie doesn't count it until she deposits it, and so that's where we're at.
So we're not, the good news is, and we're not adding to that, so we're not increasing that fund, and as we pay it down.
Do you feel even with the increases that we know are going to occur in the future, that it's gonna be more staggered than what it is now?
What increases are, what,
Yeah.
Are
As
you-
far as the amount for the
pension?
pensions, that it's gonna be more of a, especially based on the age of the folks that we have in the police department now, that any increases might be more staggered, more, maybe not occur as often.
Yeah, we don't think our increases are going to be as frequent as they were in the past.
Yeah.
MERS has been very aggressive, and rightfully so, in the past as far as pushing increases and mandatory contributions by municipalities. And that should slow down because of the employee factor, and also because of this, if we go up to 60% funding.
And part of that aggressive behavior from the state is because they set a mandate that a community must be funded at 60%. So if you're not at 60, they force you to be.
Thank you.
Anything else for Chief? We have been going for about an hour. Would anybody be opposed to a brief recess?
We should do that.
So would you like to cover dispatch first, only because that's the
Sure.
chief's, and it's a very small
Yeah.
budget, and then he'll be done.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Brief.
So dispatch, as you can see, it's controlled by a contract that we have with the Oakland County Sheriff's Department. It has mandatory increases built in it every year. And so you can see the projected increase from fiscal year 22-23 to 23-24 is just under,
$3,000.
it goes from 154 to 156. Had a little brain fade there for a minute. So, yeah,
The
so.
clerks did the-
I know. So that's where it's at. And so there really is not even any flexibility. There's no other purchases in there or anything. If you have any questions for the chief, I'm sure he.
That's a 3.5%, and that's across the county. Everybody pays the same. But I would like to add that in that fund, I am covering both Brian and Steve's dispatch needs. I'll take care of it. Thank you.
How'd that self-pat on the back feel there?
I'm just trying to recover from the wound in my back.
Welcome to our world.
So there's really not too much that you can do with this.
No,
That it is what it is.
that's a pretty standard. Really, the increases every year are just those contractual
Yeah.
increases. And that's all for dispatch.
And finally, I would just say, I apologize, I would normally stay after my presentation, but I would ask to be excused only in that I have a bunch of contractors at my house. I have a water nightmare going on.
All right.
He's got a roof leak.
Very good.
Hi.
Yeah. Anything else for Chief before he goes? Okay. All right. Let's come back at 10 after 10. Take a brief recess.
Thank you, Council.
So your roofer's finally back?
Yes. And he's supposed to be out there, and then I got 4 guys out there, and
Cleaning up the yard?
that's done. I had boys do that.
That's set aside.
What a hell of a mess you had.
Set aside.
Ceiling collapsed.
But I don't think that.
You do drywall? Well, no. Do you really? I need you to give me a quote. I need you to give me a quote.
Foundation to roof.
I know.
All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Yeah. Chief McGee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Council. Just by way of brief introduction, so you all know Chief McGee, so does a fabulous job at what he does, but as well as the job that he does, his department is outstanding. And one thing that he'll talk about just a little bit, but just in case he didn't, the chief is our only full-time employee at the fire department. And even with that, his time is shared as the building official. So the other full-time employee that's associated with the fire department is Fire Marshal Jeremy Watson, as you know, but his time also is shared with other things. And you might have seen in the newspaper in this past week, Jeremy is spearheading a research project which is going to pay some big dividends, not only to the village of Holly, but I think to the fire service across the state of Michigan in the area of hazardous train derailments. And so very appreciative for the efforts of Jeremy in that, appreciative in the fact that the chief is allowing him to do that and really has him plugged into this executive training at Fire Staff and Command for future needs of the department, as well as the opportunity to do this training. But the chief's budget, because of the fact that he is really a paid, no, it's not paid on call, a part-time firefighter department, is the majority of his staff. His budget is much lower than it would otherwise be, but the service that we receive to the village is unparalleled with anybody else around us. So take it away.
Well, I think we'll just stop. I think that's awesome.
But we'd love to hear you.
Thanks, Steve.
You always come up with the best budgets and
Well,
you're so diligent.
well, I appreciate that. We, you know, especially after 2008, we really had to sharpen our pencils and do whatever we could. I came from in Groveland. I was there for 43 years, and there it was similar. We didn't have any downtowns. We didn't have any commercial. We just had residential. So that budget was limited. So I'm good with tight budgets, and I'd rather have pots of money, but we make it work, and it's more better strategy this way. And we have and continue to compare what we offer in service, and we break it down per basically price per call, and what do you get and what does it cost. And we are more than we're half of anybody else around. So yeah, you're getting twice the whatever for half the cost. So it's important to realize that we have about 40 people that are paid on call, we call it, for people who live at home, and when the pager or your phone goes off, they respond to the station or to your house maybe. So that's paid on call. Then we also have the part-time people, and those are people like Chief Narshes utilizes that fill shifts. So right this minute we have 2 people on duty, always 24/7. A paramedic firefighter and an EMT, emergency medical technician firefighter, and they're always on duty and able to respond when needed. And so that we have a big group of those people. They are many of them are firefighters somewhere else, and we utilize them on their days off if they're don't own a lawn service or a drywall company. And so this is kind of on their 4 days off, we try to steal them. And we also have, we rely greatly on grants. We just received a big grant for all new fire gear, head to toe, which is over $100,000. We have another grant. It's tough to get paramedics, because paramedics can go, we train them up, and we always say we're a springboard or a runway, whatever metaphor you like, for the big departments. So we train them up, and they always try to steal my people, always. And so West Bloomfield, Southfield, any department, Macomb departments, we lose them to, because they can go from making, $20, $25 an hour to, $95,000 a year. So it's a big step, and one we understand, but we utilize them for those 5 years that we have them. And it really keeps us all on our toes because we're training them as we go, so it keeps us all fresh and it keeps the entire group fresh. And we have a physician, Jamie Barish, she's an ER doc that I worked with in Groveland, and she lives in the village in the condos by the storage place on Grange Hall. So last night she worked, and so we have a whole, it's very well integrated, and it seems to be working. Last year we increased our wages for paramedics to $25 an hour, and they can incrementally get $1 an hour raise more for every 1,000 hours they want as an incentive. So the more hours you work, the more hours you go up $1. And so that's so far that's working very well. So we try to be creative in methods that we utilize to get and keep people, and to encourage other people to come to us. Another fun grant fact is I have now 7 people in a paramedic program that are emergency medical technicians. Cost us $0. And each one of those programs is a little over between $7,000 and $8,000 that we would have had to budget and pay for. So, $50,000, $60,000. It takes them 18 months, but they're good EMTs and they're getting better over these next 18 months. And then we'll probably have them a year-ish while they try to find another job somewhere probably. And we'll do that again. We'll cycle through another batch. And that's kind of how we operate. You'll see later this summer, I'm going to do a big push for people to come for recruitment. We need more people within the village to be paid on call people, to jump up in the middle of the night, even though they work full-time jobs, but to come help us, whether it be on a fire or a medical emergency next door kind of thing. So you'll see a lot of push for that. My budget, which is even better than Narsha's budget. we put that in the minutes. I'll speak louder. But anyway, so we're about over 10,000 less than we were last year. And for 2 years ago, we're 90,000 cheaper. So we're doing the best we can. We still are trying to peck away at the little things that, we've got this great building now, and but it's not done. I mean, the outside looks beautiful, but we're still pecking away at, now we have gutters, and now we have this and that sort of thing. So, we don't want to eat up the whole general fund with us. We're trying to space that out a little bit. So there's a little bit in there for that. We're going to put some heat and lights in the bay and finish the training area. We do our own labor. I was a builder for years, and and we have a couple other guys. Jeremy Watson was a framer as well, and we have another guy that's a trim carpenter framer. So we have a great mix, and we all just jump in, and it doesn't cost us anything, just for materials. So, but really, our budget, we don't have anything extra. It's literally the same as it was, with maybe a $1,000 increase in here and there for, but we countered it in other spots for like vehicle insurance, the fleet insurance. We really can't control that. We are down vehicles now. We have a total of, we have the 2 engines, 1 ladder. We have 2 ambulances that are, one with the ARPA money we just put in service about 2 weeks ago, which is a wonderful addition. And then we have the chief's car and a utility pickup truck. And so there's no replacement factored into any of that this year. Last year we went over on repairs, and we hope that doesn't happen this year. But again, when you have a 1986 truck here and a 1998 truck there, things are going to happen. But we take really good care of all our vehicles. We wash them after every run. We try to stay ahead of things where we can. If you see one of our vehicles nosed in instead of facing out, that means it's out of service. That's just some people don't drive it when they're not supposed to. And we have engine 2 right now is faced the wrong way, and it's just a throttle thing. And Chris Preston, who lives in the village, used to own Muffler Man. He's a master mechanic. He has every certification. He just does that for us. On bigger jobs, he bills us, but not near what he could. We don't have to take it anywhere, he just does it in-house. So we really try to maximize everything we can. We've talked about using that back building for, initially we thought, well, maybe we can put the cops back there and we could, or put the village offices. Another thing we've done to try to save money is we have utilized that building for storage of county assets. So right now we have a foam trailer that runs for the whole county. But if we have a big incident on, the tracks, for example, we have, hundreds of gallons of foam here that we didn't have to buy. We have 2 boats now that are like new, that are a county, actually a state resource through Michigan Task Force 1. I had budgeted last year to buy a new boat because ours is all sad and deflated. But we have these 2. It's on a double-decker trailer and new motors. It didn't cost us a penny. And the next thing we're going to do is get a hazmat truck in there. So you'll see a big orange truck. You're the first to hear this. Big orange, weird-looking truck kind of thing. Looks like a fire engine with no pump. But there's 4 of those throughout the county. Again, with the hazmat potential, but I hate to say even more than that, but maybe a little more than that. Every department in the county pays a fee, and if you don't contribute with labor, you can get in-kind credits for storage. So we don't have any full-time people to say, I'll be on the tech team and repel off ropes. I can do that, but there's only one of me, right? So, but if there's something that goes on in West Bloomfield or Southfield or wherever, those people throughout the county do respond to that, and we bring the truck now, and that counts for us. So we don't have to come up with another choice. We're gonna have to come up with almost $50,000 in addition because they have no people because they're all volunteers and they really don't have storage capacity. So we really won't have to do that. So it's become, while it seems like, wow, we have a lot of bays, it's really saving us money in the long run. I think that's the kind of a global picture of what we're doing. Time's up. I have 4 little grandkids at home, so I'm happy to field any questions right now.
Yeah, so but before you jump to your questions real quick, because this may answer a question for you, is the chief talked about the age of his engine and his ladder truck. And so they're both very aged. We have grant requests in right now, and it's making good progress through the system for a new ladder truck. If that is not granted within the next couple of years, that is something we will have to address for sure. But at this point, because we're in this grant process, we did not put anything about that in the budget. We're hopeful. We've had some positive feedback. I'm meeting on Wednesday with Senator Lisa McClain. She came and introduced herself to the group here to talk about the ladder truck, to talk about some other funding within the village for water, sewer, maybe some things at Falk Road, just real preliminary discussions. So we're starting down that road with her. A lot of people talk about, why doesn't the village pursue grants? Well, the reality of it is we pursue a lot of grants. And part of the reason that the chief's budget is where it's at now is because he gets a $100,000 grant for turnout gear. He just got a grant request approved for new nozzles, which are several $1,000s, as you can imagine. $25,000, and then hose in the past and things like that. So we are working forward, but as far as vehicle needs, we're cognizant of the fact that we do need to work on replacement of those, but that's why you don't see those in the budget, because we need to complete this grant process first.
Yeah, the feds actually called me and asked more information. They said, you requested $985,000. They go up they're going up like crazy, $50,000, $60,000 a year. And they said, what happens if you get this grant and it takes 3 years to build the thing? Well, I found out we can utilize the grant monies and save the price basically. So we can prepay, and they will lock in the price with that. So fingers crossed, I mean, we'll know this year whether that comes to fruition or not. If not, maybe in, November of '24, we might try, without the police, go for a millage maybe, just for trucks and try to skinny it down a little bit. But, that's obviously your choice, and we really do hope that something good will happen with this, with the grant process. One other thing real quick that Jerry touched on was the Tri-County Times kind of may have misled a little bit. When I read it after Jerry read it, it felt a little bit like we're not prepared if a train accident happens.
That's the way I perceived it.
Yeah.
So I actually called him and said, hey, you guys aren't ready for this?
So what we utilize in Oakland County and why it worked so well, and I was part of starting that, is when the downtown fires example, we have box cards now. Back in the old days, if there was a fire, you'd have to say, well, send me North Oakland, and the person on scene would have to kind of decide on the fly. So what we did after Katrina, because there was a whole big, with the hurricane there, we weren't prepared to go down there as Michigan, so the state came up with a plan, and then we implemented to, actually we came up with a plan and the state implemented to have a box card system. So what that means is for every level of emergency, we can say, give me a second alarm, give me a third alarm, give me a fourth alarm, give me a fifth, give me a special, and you can pick all those things. Well, that's been in place since mid-2000s, and 2003 actually. So, and that's why we did so well with the fire, is because that was already in place. We just kept up in the box, and we were able to get special equipment as we needed it. And the incident management team was part of that, and all those people that showed up. Well, we have that today. If right the second something happens with a train or anything big, a leak from wastewater, whatever, with chlorine, we are prepared for that. And by that I mean we use the box cards, and on there we have a hazmat layer. And so all 4 county teams would be responding, plus the truck that we will here ultimately have, with technicians from all around the county. If it's bigger than that, we call our dispatch center, and they call the state, and the state has a red center, and the red center dispatches state assets that we have as part of the box alarm system for Michigan, have created and certified, credentialed basically, to say, if I call a hazmat truck from Alma, I get a truck, I get what we expect with the equipment. It's not, 2 dudes in a pickup truck with a 55-gallon drum, right? So that's all in place, and we credentialed that. It's ongoing credentialing for technical rescue, for hazmat, for anything out of incident management team, big incidents. That's in place. So we are prepared, but we are going to be much better. The state's going to be much better prepared with Jeremy's. He's making a special box card just for train type incidents. So he's going to really heavy load this for the box alarm, the first response, for the, everything will come automatically instead of having to be called up. He'll save us some steps. So that was kind of the misunderstanding when you read the paper, that it sounds like, we have our head in the sand. It's just the opposite. But we will be much better, and the whole state will really be much better. So it's getting a lot of momentum, and he's doing a great job with that.
Chief, I'd like to just back up a minute
Yeah.
on the trucks and point out that the trucks that we currently have were not purchased brand new, that they had high mileage on them, or a significant amount of mileage on them when we purchased them.
Yeah, we've bought, in our fleet right now, we do have an engine that, when we broke up from NACFA, that they bought in 2005. So that was a new truck. And, breakup, I shouldn't have said.
Breakup, I like that.
But that was a new truck, but the other trucks you're correct.
Yeah, just for those that haven't
No,
been on council to
that's a
know
great
that
point, yeah.
what we're
No, and-
looking at down the road.
Yeah, no, and we've always done that, whatever it takes to, you know, to fill this void, we make it happen, and,
And like I said, I know you do your due diligence when you're checking on these things and putting on an offer to purchase or request to purchase, so.
right. The sad part going forward, there's not very many of those left, because now it's 2-year build time. If you guys said, hey, you know what, we dug up this bucket of money, buy a new ladder truck today and buy a new engine today, 3 years, 2 or 3 years. That's the other problem, is by the time you finally get momentum, now you order it and now you have to wait, so it's frustrating.
Hurry up and wait.
Yep, exactly. So people have bought up all the used stuff because they need to fill gaps quicker.
Well, and it's less expensive at that point in time too, than
For sure.
purchasing a brand new machine.
For sure, yeah. And I wish Kim's point about, you know, an fire engine being 300,000, that's almost an ambulance now. People are paying that for an ambulance. So a normal fire engine now is at least 600,000 stock. And a ladder truck, we found the one I went for the grant for was just under $1 million. Really, it's 1.5. I don't care about shiny wheels. I just need it to do what it does.
Right.
So. Sure,
Did we do any specialized training with Bishop?
we do annually. Yeah, we go right to the airport. They bring in, we get credits for, I mean, it helps us. We get continuing ed credits. All of our people have to have a lot of CEUs. And so we utilize that for a nice 8-hour block of those.
Is that part of our training budget, or
It
is that
is.
something that's outside of it?
No, that's within our budget.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you do the training in the parking lot, I see you guys working all the time. Is that just all in-house, or?
It's some of each. Every day we try to do 2 hours of training with the small crews that are there, or people that want to come in. We require 12 hours a month of training just so we can maintain our readiness and the state requirements. So we do a lot of training also.
Cool.
If we don't get the grant, are you considering doing a standalone millage for the ladder truck?
That, I think by the end of this year, we'll know whether that happens, and maybe in '24, November, that might be a time to think about a standalone, if you know, if the council thinks.
And the equipment we have now, if we were denied the grant, is the equipment that we have now gonna keep us?
You know, we spent about $17,000 on it, which the insurance paid for, fortunately, because it broke at the fire. I mean, it made almost all the way through the fire before it let go a little bit. So, you know, we're just trying to stay ahead of the oil changes and stay ahead of everything we can. Again, with Chris, he works typically on Saturdays, and he lubes everything up and does everything he can preventively. Say that, it's Debbie knows it. Being ready. So, yeah, no, we try to stay ahead of it.
I think you answered, so I have 4 other questions, and I think on equipment, we're looking at going from 90 down to 10, like that's a huge cut. Is it just because there's no big purchases expected?
No, so the 90,000 was a placeholder for the grant. So,
Okay.
we used it out of there, but you don't see revenue come in on this. That was covered primarily.
And then repairs, percentage-wise, is projected to be much less as well. And is that just because it's a new building and you're doing that staggering of your needs?
The repairs of the
Building and grounds?
building and grounds, yes,
Okay.
correct.
So,
Steve's the groundskeeper.
True.
All of that's been done already, pretty much.
now this I'm not sure on the front page. I'm thinking the third line of firefighters kind of swallowed the expense above it from the shift wage firefighters.
Yeah, so what we did is we combined, and this was Debbie's suggestion and made good sense. We had different rates for different people. If you were going to training, you made a little lesser amount. And with our union contract, it really made the same cost across the, whatever they were doing. So it simplified it on many levels for me and for Debbie, to combine it into one. So those
Okay.
3 will go away into the one. going
Okay,
forward.
so yeah, the next time this comes around, that line's just not going to be there.
Right.
Okay,
correct.
thank you. That's what I thought, but I
Yeah,
wasn't
no,
sure.
Great catch.
And then my last question, on overtime, it's expected to be much less next year than our current activity right now. Is this due to new hires or?
No, it's due to this hand where I had surgery. So what I normally do is I will fill in and
Your
we're a
salary?
And I'm salaried.
Got
So-
it.
And so, but from the first of the year till now, I was supposed to work last night even, I can't get clearance because I can't close my hand and do whatever I'm supposed to do. So, between January and now, we've had, I did really good. I was able to save about 30,000 up until the end of the year, but now I can't work the truck technically. So-
Okay, so that it is kind of pending on you healing, but even if you don't, we're,
Right.
percentage-wise, it's kind of a big difference, but
It
not
is.
in reality of actual numbers.
We're
It's
hoping.
$7,000-ish,
I'm hoping more than anyone.
10 grand, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else for Chief McGee?
Yeah, Chief McGee, I would like to show my appreciation for your detailed presentation
Oh, thank you.
before. And you mentioned that you have very few full-time employees. And I worked for a large company, and we did the same thing. We went to a lot of part-timers. And what that turned the company I worked into was it turned us into a stepping stone. People would go get the experience and go on to
Right.
a higher paying job full-time. And I was just wondering, is it feasible to add your number of full-time employees to make better jobs to kind of curb that?
Well, we've talked about that, and there are grants for that I have applied and gotten in Groveland, for example. It's called the SAFER Grant, still through FEMA, through the feds, and they pay for your people basically for 3 years. The 4th year, you have to pay for it. Our problem is, on the 4th year, we can't afford it. And going forward, because you have all those loaded wages with, pensions and all those other things that, and insurances are all factored in. And they even changed it more. Now, instead of, if I could have 3 people, that'd be amazing. Well, now they're saying you have to meet NFPA 1710 and in different ways. They want us to staff different. To get the grant, we'd have to hire 6 people. And which would be, if you just use 100,000 as the number, 600,000, that's almost my whole budget in 4 years. And hopefully I won't be, not hopefully, but I'm pretty sure I won't be here in 4 years, but that would be really kicking the can down to, an administration that it wouldn't be really fair to them. I would love to do that, make it so much easier,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah,
for
I
the-
know it's
as you would-
really rough with a lot of part-time employees
Yeah.
that are.
But we really,
Moving
all
on.
the departments here really do try to share, that we all understand that, this year might be a cop car and this year might be, turnout gear, whatever. We take turns and we try to rotate, and we understand that there's only one size pot of money, and we can't increase that, so.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, though, I think you're absolutely correct. When we look at that in other departments within the village, DPW is a good example. He has a hard time attracting and keeping, part-time people. I think the fire service is just a little different. I think, truthfully, part of it is because of the leadership of the chief. But, he's able to attract these 20-year veterans from other departments. And so rather than having brand-new people come in and fill a shift, we have 20-year veterans from larger departments with more experience that come in. I think that's part of what makes us special here. Now, can you do that forever? Maybe not, but, for the next period of time that we see in the future, we're able to do that. We'd love to have all full-time. We know financially it's not feasible, but I think right in this current window we're at, I actually think we are better served in this way that we are, not only financially, but I think experience-wise.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for Chief?
Okay. So he's going to stay right here with us because the next one online is the building department. And we talked earlier about both he and Jeremy splitting their duties between the fire department, the building department, and of course, Jeremy, code enforcement and historic preservation and whatever other hat we give him. But I'll let the chief go ahead. This budget, very similar to the previous one that you saw. It just kind of is what it is. There's really not anything extra built in. It is a little higher this year than in the past, basically due to contractual wage raises, but other than that, it's pretty static.
Really, the only other piece of this that may be adjusted on the revenue side going forward is we've developed a group throughout this region on fees that we charge for, inspections or permit fees. So what we want to do is we're on the lower end of the scale. If somebody builds a new house or builds a new cannabis, whatever it is, we're a little bit low. There are some communities to the south of us, and I Novi is the big one, expensive one. But there's other departments, building departments, that their fees are a lot more. So what we're trying to do is, if you're in Springfield Township or in the Village of Holly or Rose Township or wherever you may be, that there's kind of if I'm a builder, I can build a pole barn. I know my permit fee is going to be this amount, pretty much in this whole region. It's not going to be, boy, I really want to build in Rose Township because it's $12, and then I go to Groveland Townships and $2,000. That's we're trying to have a regional, and really even more than that, a county kind of standard that we utilize. That'll bring a little more revenue in. Our inspectors will still make the same amount. Jeremy and I do all the plan reviews as the building official. Jeremy does a lot of most of the inspections. I do some. And then we have a part-time people to do the electrical inspections, the plumbing, and the mechanical. And so we utilize them per inspection, basically. And but then the rest, as Jerry said, is just really what it is.
Chief, are the mechanical and state, you're saying that we have our own person
We
that
do.
does
We don't
that?
use this. We don't utilize the state.
Anymore?
No.
Okay.
Problem with that is, I've looked in that for other communities that I've worked in, and it's if you want a footing inspection, it can be 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And if you want a footing inspection, Jeremy or I can be there in 10 minutes.
Right.
And so it's all about, it's all about the service, right? And they're our customers, and they deserve to have us right there. So we don't want them to wait, and the state's fees are more than ours, so permits.
So the municipality has the option of
They do.
doing it themselves?
They do.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oops.
Question, for the wages, that would be you and Jeremy under those wages?
Yes, because we're split
Okay.
between the two budgets.
Okay.
Anything else before we move on?
That was an easy one, Steve.
It's easy when you go down.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
DDA.
So thank you. So Nick actually is the 4th DDA director that I've worked with here in the village. And from previously doing his job, it's not an easy job. In prior community, I was the executive director of the DDA, and so I appreciate Nick's work. He does a great job. He's very active in the community. Just by way of information, so his budget comes to the village council because it's required by state law that the council approve all budgets. In reality, that is the only control that a municipality has over the DDA is through the budget. They, as you know, the President Delaney serves on that board, but they have an independent board which controls the activities of the DDA, as well as works with Nick in compiling the budget that you see today. So I think Nick does a great job in that area. He also provides a lot of extra service to the village itself and functions administratively within our team. And so we meet, we try to meet every 2 weeks, all the department heads, to talk about not only what you guys consider during your council meetings, but from a management standpoint, as far as a team, on where we want to take the village and use the money, as the Chief McGee said, collectively. So we work together in that way. But Nick is a great service to Debbie and I in the management team, and so I just wanted to give that acknowledgement. Take her away.
Thanks. So, as far as easy budgets, mine's probably the easiest to go through and see. You know, if you don't know, the DDA works within the 4 main areas of organization, which is working with our volunteers, the internal workings of the DDA, grants, things like that. Our design team, which is, you know, designing, you know, upkeeping in the DDA area, as well as maintaining the historic preservation part of our, which is very unique and important to our town. And then also promotion, which is promoting within the village itself, but also promoting out throughout the state and even further than the state in getting Holly known and letting people know this is a great place to either come visit, you know, have a vacation, live, work, play, all those types of things. And then our economic vitality area, which is working with businesses, both current businesses that we have and supporting them, but also helping and partnering with the village to be a place that attracts businesses to that area as well. This year, our 2 main areas I said that I would think we're working in would be within promotion and organization, in that we have really, since I've come on board, one of our main focuses has really been reaching out further than maybe in the past, and letting people know that this is a place that people need to come and visit and be a part of and live in. And so we've really been working hard at on some of our internal things that show that, as well as promoting with different areas outside of, you know, maybe our general area to let people know. And we've done that by partnering with other DDA districts through Visit Detroit, and also through Pure Michigan, and really beefing up our areas with them and making those connections with those people that are really going to help get Holly out there more and on the minds of people. And so with that, and then as well with the organization, we're working on some of our internal things, like our vision statement, so that it reflects that those are some of the things we're working on, and also doing a new market analysis, so that we see within the DDA district what our strengths, what are things that we're doing well, but then maybe what are some things that we want to look towards, or some things we want to attract to our area to help, again, be that attraction to people around us. And so that's, you know, really been our focus since I've been here. I have a great team around in both of those areas, and people that are helping me develop those things as well as implement a lot of them. So the one thing, our budget is pretty much exactly the same. The one area I did want to point out, just because it's a little vague, and also it's the one item that really pushed our budget higher than what it is, and that's in the project costs, which is on the 3rd page of the budget. And the reasoning for that is because we've put in cost into that. So project costs is kind of like the area where we want to work on a specific project within the DDA, but maybe it doesn't fit exactly into one of those 4 areas. And so what we were really working on doing this year, and working with Brian and his team as well, is getting a new public restroom in the downtown area. And it's going to be one that's going to be a help both for the downtown and also for Crapo Park, and also for, once we have the depot moved, for that area as well. And so, as you can imagine, that's a very costly endeavor, and we're partnering again with the village in doing that. And so that's the main reason for that uptick in that area. Between that, that's also an area where we do our business. We have grants that we get through Oakland County in our partnership with them, but the DDA itself also does several business grants throughout the year as well, and that's placed within there as well. So.
That was one of my 2 questions, and so thanks for that. And that was intuitive. So with the new public restroom, will that quote include the annual maintenance?
No, that's just for, the building of that.
And then, will there be someone in charge of maintaining that restroom? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Brian.
Affectionately, we call Brian the village janitor.
Used to be my job.
So that's no expense because Brian is salary.
Correct. Well, so it's Brian's crew.
Okay.
Right, so Brian does
there,
not-
so there is an expense, okay. Second question is, the only other number that I saw kind of jump a little bit, and it was not big dollar-wise, just percentage-wise, was printing and publications. Is that just due to working harder to promote projects?
Most definitely, yeah. And so I'm trying to be more professional, getting things out there, pushing it out more. It's definitely, that's where that came out of.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Nick, I know we've talked about this in the past, but proposed location for the new restroom.
Yeah, so, and we did have one location at one point, but as we looked into a little bit more, the area didn't really work well for what we were thinking. So the new area that we've worked with is over, I don't know if you know where the depot is going to be moved, but it's basically where the billboard is downtown, and that's the area the depot is. So a little bit to the north of that area, in that same area there is where the new restrooms will be. And we figured that way it really will be a help both for Crapo Park that doesn't have a stable restroom, but then also is close to the downtown and also very close to the depot.
Is that village property or is that land lease?
It is, so the village purchased that property a couple of years ago from CSX.
The reason I asked that is because they weren't here yet. I
Yes.
already knew the answer.
Yeah, in anticipation of the move, we purchased that property from CSX.
But we still don't own Crapo, correct?
So we lease a good portion, yes.
Right.
99 years.
Will that bathroom be locked in the evening?
I'm
Yes.
guessing it would be the same.
It will, yes.
Okay.
But just to clear the air about, because I've heard so much scuttlebutt about the downtown bathrooms, those are owned by the vault, correct?
They are owned by the vault. They have given us we have a lease in perpetuity forever, but yes. And so that's why it's important, not only because of the age, I mean, the plumbing that connects that bathroom into their building is close to 100 years old. Mm-hmm. And so that's problematic just on its face. But their building, they also suffer a certain amount of graffiti or vandalism. And so it's appropriate, really, that we move out of there. And I think the new proposed location, as Nick stated, is going to service all 3 areas very, very well.
Do you know what might happen to the current downtown public bathroom?
I would assume, I don't think they have definite plans, but I would assume that they're going to incorporate that right into their business needs there, because when you do large events like they do, there's always a shortage of restrooms.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll start locking it when they don't have an event there then, if it's not
it
gonna.
It will be, once we construct a new one, it will be locked to the
Yeah,
public anyway.
that makes sense.
And we'll have
Right.
appropriate signage.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll have appropriate signage along Battle Alley to direct people to the new location.
okay, great.
Good
Thanks,
job,
Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
So your next budget is council. We recommended 10%. No, I'm just kidding. So your budget really, I mean, just as your annual pay is very low. And so
We know.
probably the yeah, I mean, so $7,000 and $7,065 for your entire budget. It includes $500 in training. The rest of it basically is the wages per charter. you've used $170 in training this year. A lot of training that you can get is free. We do recognize that. But certainly training is something that council could look at. And, you know, if 500 is not enough, you know, it's something that we could talk about and you could approve. But we always encourage training. We push it very heavily within our departments. And so I just think it's beneficial. So that's all. I mean, your budget, I don't see where you have anywhere to go. Debbie's very good at it. I mean, she gave you $100 on one line, you spent 91. She gave you 15 another, you spent 1208. And you spent $139 in operating supplies.
We
out
are
of
fiscally
150.
responsible.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, because it's been a great mystery to me, I've never asked, what do we get per meeting? Is it like $15 is
You
what
get
I've heard?
$900 per year.
$900 per
and so
year.
it varies per meeting
Forecast.
depending upon how many meetings.
So it doesn't matter how many meetings, we get
Correct.
900 a year.
Yep, and
Got
you
it.
get that paid every
Close.
November.
Okay.
Oh, you're certainly not in this for the money.
It's purely the fame.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fame.
Except the president.
I'm
right?
charging for autographs. I don't know about you
Right?
guys.
Yeah, so that's all with that budget.
Okay.
If you have no other questions. The next budget is Department 172, that's the village manager. My budget is pretty much the same as in past years. The only area that I increased, I doubled the training in that I only attended one training last year. I anticipate attending 2 trainings this year. And just as with the other departments and with council, I think that that's an important area. Both of my trainings, even though my contract allows me to go out of state for trainings, both of my trainings this year that I'm looking at are in-state. And so that's my budget. Would you have any questions on that?
I think I can safely say that council would like your budget better than ours.
True.
I do have a question. I'm confused. I must have read something wrong somewhere else. I thought I remembered seeing that wow, like this is hugely different. I thought that your wages were $143,000 per year.
No.
No.
So
I can see
my
that.
so my
Yeah.
wages, total wages, you'll see a sheet in your next budget meeting that will have individual employee costs, because a good majority of my work is split between water, sewer, major roads, building, whatever. My salary is split between those, so my entire salary is in the ballpark of 112.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
that's the entire salary. I mean, I have to say, I'm very happy with that. It is lower than the average for managers, you know, but you know what? It's fine. You know what? We work together. We have a great team. But yeah, my entire package for sure is more than this. It is in the area of 112 to 115.
Okay. When I figure out where I saw that 143 for something, I'll let you know.
I would say probably social media,
Yeah.
which I would say,
There's never any disagreements.
yeah. I would disregard most of what's on there, but
It might have been the public restroom. It's
correct.
written
Yeah,
on.
that could be too.
Right.
For a good time called Jade.
I hope Lori's not watching.
Okay.
So the next budget that you have is Department 210. That's our attorney. Now, when we first came on board, so Brian Clausen and I, we hired into the village in 2010. And so since then, we've made a lot of changes. One of the changes we made is we used to be on a retainer system with the attorney, which was higher than our budget that we have now, and that's because we took them off retainer. And so we do a lot of the preliminary legwork ourselves, and we do a lot of, not work that we shouldn't be doing, but work that we can do that assists the attorney. We still send everything through the attorney. And so the entire budget for that is, again, we requested $15,000. This year was a little bit higher because we had some labor related things that we talked about with both attorneys. This next year, we do have the fire department's union contract that is coming due for negotiations. And then the following year, we will have our Teamsters and the 2 police unions. So that's the kind of activity that labor covers. But we really have, thankfully, probably should be knocking on wood, very few labor issues, and most of the issues Mr. Gildner takes care of very expediently and well. So that's the entire budget, very small, $15,000.
Sherry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The potential lawsuit with the medical marijuana, is that encompassed in the labor relations as well? With
Yes.
the attorney?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we have some professional services that are set aside in other budgets, but yes. So your next budget really is Ms. Bigger. I'll let her talk about that if you'd like. Data processing.
Data processing is, for contractual, it is our contract with IT Right, which handles our computer operations, our emails, our server. Operating supplies are if we need to replace a couple of computers. Right now I have 2 that are past the date of being replaced. I don't mean specifically me, I mean me, the village. And repairs and maintenance are also for any IT-related issues.
Would the website fall under this, under data processing?
No, we don't pay our IT person for website.
For the website, okay.
Correct.
Brian still handling
Right now, yes.
So we are in the final stages, though, since you brought up website, you mentioned it. We have selected a new vendor, and so we're in the final stages of securing those services and should be replacing the current website very soon.
Excellent.
Are these the people responsible for maintaining the integrities of our email?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, our server and our emails and our, the server where all of our modules are at work.
And I know that at least one of us was having an issue with email, being able to get into it and whatnot. Has that been resolved?
Are you asking about me?
Yeah, it wasn't.
I was gonna say, I did put in
Yeah.
a work order
Yeah.
and
We don't need to stay there. That was just a side question,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Working on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't been notified that it didn't work, so
Yeah.
I assume it did.
Yeah.
Anything else on data processing? The next budget is the clerk treasurer. That is my department. We pretty much stayed the same. I have contractual increases also for my staff, as my staff is union also. I don't think anything else went up. Any questions on my budget?
Good job.
Community development. You want me to keep going, or you want?
Sure, you're on a roll.
Community development, that includes the, excuse me, when I have to post public hearings in the paper for planning commission, or when I do yours, obviously that comes out of my budget as the clerk treasurer, but planning, zoning, those all go through there. The training of commissioners, that's the training of all of the other commissions. Plan, professional services and plan review, developer build are kind of the same thing. One we pay for, one I actually bill out. That is our meetings with Roe for site plan reviews. A number of the meetings are covered under their application for the site plan, but sometimes they continue on and go back and forth and back and forth. If it goes over that, then I bill them, and then it goes under plan review, developer build. And I actually bill out for that, and you'll see a revenue line for that also. I put the CDGB expenses in there. CDGB You'll see a revenue line for CDGB expenses. You guys approved our CDGB applications. CDGB runs 2 or 3 years behind, so, but anything that we spend money on the CDGB expenses, we bill under this line, and then when the county reimburses us, we get the revenue back in the revenue line that matches it. Any questions on community development?
You touched on it, but I'm a little confused about the
Okay.
plan review developer bill going down so much. Is it because we just have less reviews expected next year than this year?
Yeah, because we had some really big projects.
Thank you.
You know, the memory care was some big billing.
Yeah.
I don't see any future, you know, large. We had, I believe both of the marijuana ones have already went through, so the plan review process, so.
And in the grand scheme of things, that number really, while we need a number in there to have some accounting, it really doesn't matter, because if the bill is higher than 5,000, the received in revenues will be the same amount.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it will all equal out in the end.
Gotcha.
So you could have had 5,000, you could have had the actual cost of 13,000, but it's just whatever's received.
And the CDBG funds, I mean, those, we really don't know from year to year what we're gonna get. So
Well, I
this
know
is a
what we
guesstimate.
have planned.
Right.
But, you know, like the sidewalk project, we've had planned for 2 or 3 years, we haven't. I have one person nibbling at the, RFP, so hopefully. So that if we start that, then it will be billed through here, but we'll get the revenue in the same year, so they'll even out.
Okay.
Any other questions for community development? Non-departmental? Non-departmental. That is pretty much a catch-all for things that are not specific general departments. Like our, when we purchase office supplies to bill for taxes, that actually is for every department, not just mine. So we bill it under a non-departmental. We pay the utilities for the village offices under non-departmental. Project costs is probably gonna go up because depending on how far we are in the relocation of the village offices, that will probably be put in there. Our MERS surplus, we pay an additional, when Act 202 went into law, I believe in 2018, that was the law where the state of Michigan tried to get us all up to 60%. And we filed, and council approved at that time, a plan to try to bring us up higher each year. And we agreed to pay an additional $75,000 a year. 25 of it's in here, 25's in water, and 25 is in sewer. And that is our corrective action plan through the state. I file it every year. According to the regulations for Act 202, every year that we're under 60%, I file this plan, and they agree that $75,000 additional a year is fine. Hopefully, if we get this grant, that will change. And we should find out about that in the summer. Office supplies, again, are for things that are village-wide, not specific to a department, like the taxes and the tax billing. And any questions on non-departmental?
I'd like to see how you pinched all those pennies on utilities from 21-22, because I'd like to do that at my house.
She's good.
Yeah.
She is good.
Yeah, bravo.
And that is all we have scheduled for today's budget
All
study.
right.
Parks will be covered underwater
Parks
No,
will be covered next.
it'll be covered next week because.
individually.
Yeah, it is
Okay.
under Brian, and so that is one
Under
of
Brian,
Brian's
gotcha.
budgets. So
Okay, thank you.
We'll have a few
Yeah.
general fund departments, Parks is one of those.
Parks and Cemetery and DPW will be covered under the Brian show.
All right.
Buildings and grounds, DPW.
Unless there is anything else, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Steve, home to babysit. I'm doing the same thing.
You wanna-
I've got 3 Lori's
Did you have a chance
already
to read that?
texted one.
Oh, thank you. I know, it's like a pen, you just put it in your purse.
Send you a screenshot. That's probably not.
Just automatically put it in your purse.